Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I'm going to be running you over how to set up your nutrition to achieve the lean and athletic physique that everyone wants but doesn't quite understand how to get. Now, in order to achieve that physique, you need to be focusing on building lean muscle mass and losing fat simultaneously, which is possible. If you're new to the channel, my name's Joe. I own an online coaching company called Athletic Aesthetic. We work with professionals and we specialize in helping them drop body fat, build muscle, whilst helping them manage their routine, which really is the key to success. So it is possible to drop body fat and build muscle at the same time, but you need to have the mindset of fueling for performance. A lot of people, when they try and diet down and get lean very, very quickly, they reduce their calorie intake massively. They often always massively drive up their expenditure as well. So they become very, very hungry very quickly. They're energy deprived, and their ability to still push and perform well in the gym is massively reduced. So in order to calculate essentially the right amount of calories that you need to be eating to allow you to lose fat and build muscle at the same time, we first need to figure out your TDEE, which stands for total daily energy expenditure. And there are various online calculators that you can use. We literally type in TDEE.com. So to calculate your TDEE, you will need a combination of your height, your weight, and your activity level. You can find these calculators online, it'll calculate it for you. So I know of myself, I am 178 centimeters, I weigh 80 kilograms, and I'm a highly active individual because I train 6 days a week. Now, the online calculator gives me 3,100 calories as my TDEE maintenance calories. So this is the amount of calories I would need to consume every single day to stay exactly the same, provided that everything in my routine stayed the same. Now, in order to drop body fat, which is obviously one of the goals here, you want to subtract between 300 to 500 calories away from that, depending on how quickly that you want to lean down. So someone that wants to do things slightly more slowly, keep their energy higher because the calories are higher, you would just take 300 off 3,100, equaling 2,800. If you wanted to be quote unquote a little bit more aggressive, you would take 500 off, which would equal 2,600. Now, the difference obviously between 26 and 2,800 is going to be the amount of calories that you consume each day. So if you have less calories, generally you will have less energy. So therefore you could say that maybe your performance in the gym would be slightly better if you kept your calories higher at 2,800 if you only subtracted 300. Yeah. Okay, so the next step is to calculate your macros. Now, it's important to understand what the function of each of the macronutrient is. So protein for recovery, the ability to build muscle, satiation as well, fat for essential hormone function and satiety and energy levels, and then carbohydrates. The best way to think about these is these are your primary energy source when you're training, which is why, going back to what we were saying before, we want to try and keep carbohydrates high to support performance in the gym, to actually allow you to build muscle. If you go way, way too low on the carbs too quickly, you'll find yourself feeling hungry, very depleted. You'll find your physique probably looks flat and you'll struggle to progressively overload in the gym. So generally for protein, for most males who aren't heavily overweight, we would go for between 2 and 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight, and that would allow you to calculate your protein target. The next step would be to decide on a fat target. Now, I think this is person dependent based off the sorts of foods that you like to eat. So for someone of my body weight of 80 kg, if they were trying to diet down, we would prescribe between 60 to 80 grams of fat. For me, myself, I like to consume not a high fat diet, but I do enjoy eating foods that are relatively high in fat because I find that they satiate me and it gives me good prolonged energy throughout the day. So I would probably opt for the higher end, but if you were wanting to save calories and drive more into carbohydrates, if you prefer carbs in your diet, you could go for the lower end of 60 grams there. I would not recommend going any lower than 55 grams. I think you'll probably find yourself being hungry, and as I said before, a good amount of healthy quality fats in the diet is essential for hormone balance. So using my example before, for my prolonged deficit, a slightly longer deficit, 2,800 calories, 300 off maintenance, 176 grams of protein, 2.2 times 80 grams of fat because I enjoy eating more fats. And then the remainder comes from the carbohydrates, which is 344 grams of carbs. So these are my macros, these are the calories, that is what I would consume. I would monitor my body weight over time and I would track my intake. And then if I found that I wasn't progressing at the rate that I wanted from a nutrition standpoint, I would then pull down carbohydrates slightly, but we'll get onto that in a second. So the next step, once you calculate your macros, is to establish a meal structure. Now, I will say for fat loss, the most important thing is going to come down to your overall calorie and energy intake throughout the day. And then within that, I would say meal timing and structure, it really does come down to personal preference. So for some people, they like to save a really good amount of calories and carbohydrates for later on in the evening because they know that that is when they become most hungry. I know I certainly fall into that category. I like to place my carbohydrates slightly later on in the day because I find that if I consume too many early on in the morning, I become sluggish and lethargic and it affects my work. But the most important thing is total calorie intake, build your kind of meal structure and timing off that. Within that, try to relatively evenly distribute your protein throughout the day. So with my target of 176 grams per day, I like personally to consume 3 larger meals per day. I know some people like to have 4 smaller meals, but I like 3 larger ones. So I would aim for between 45 to 50 grams of protein per each 3 of my meals throughout the day. And my usual eating structure will be first meal at around 10 for a kind of late breakfast. Then I would have my second meal around 2 o'clock and then my evening meal at between probably 6 and half 7, depending on my routine. And then within that, I would add on a protein-based snack of around 25 grams to help me hit my total intake of 176. And that would usually be a protein shake. And I would probably have that protein shake between my second and my third meal. So that's how I like to split that's how I like to roughly distribute my protein evenly throughout the day. And then carbohydrate wise, because if you are dieting down, trying to lose fat, your carbohydrate intake will generally be lower than what it would be if you were trying to obviously gain weight or maintain weight. So you want to be prioritizing consuming your carbohydrates around training. Similar to protein, still try and evenly distribute them throughout the day so you have good energy, but you really want to be prioritizing your carbs around training. So if you were training at, let's say, 2 p.m. or something like that, try and have some carbohydrates within probably 90 minutes before the training session. I would say between 50 to 70 grams. And then to aid with recovery as well, make sure that you are having some carbohydrates post-workout. We get quite a common question around training fasted and training first thing in the morning because a lot of the people that we coach like to get into the gym before work. You can train fasted. Research shows that it really will not affect muscle growth too much, provided that you have had a good dose of carbohydrates in your evening meal the day before. Again, I would try and have 50 to 70 grams in that evening meal. Otherwise, I have found that clients that train first thing in the morning, if they don't have a good amount of carbs in their evening meal, they often feel that their training performance suffers. If you are slightly hungry in the morning and you wanted a quick hit of energy, you could have something like a banana, a bagel with some honey or something like that. Just pure carbohydrates that are going to digest quickly, because if you have proteins and fats with those carbohydrates, it's going to slow down digestion. But to summarize, it really is personal preference when it comes to fat loss. Try and evenly distribute your protein throughout the day, 3 or 4 meals, maybe a protein-based snack if you need that to hit the targets, and then prioritize your carbohydrate intake around training to promote performance. So in terms of what sort of foods that you should be eating, I'd highly recommend making at least 80, probably 85% of your diet whole foods focus as much as you can. And it goes without saying, reducing the amount of processed food in your diet. The reason for that is you're going to be far more satiated when you eat whole foods versus processed foods. The more processed foods that you eat, the more that you crave it and the more that you want. I know for me, I'd be far more satiated on 2,800 calories of whole foods versus, let's say, 1,500 calories of whole foods and the rest coming from processed foods. You will also notice positive effects to energy levels, energy distribution throughout the day, skin health and things like that. In terms of meals out, this is a common occurrence for our clients. I would say most of our clients probably eat out at least twice a week. So when dieting down, we have to factor these meals out into our daily calorie intake, but also the weekly calorie intake as well. So the best way to prepare for these meals out and social events is to bank calories. So for example, if I'm on my target of 2,800 calories and I know that I'm going to have a meal out that might put me up to 3,400 calories, maybe it was a starter, a main and a drink or two, that's putting me 600 above my target. So the best way to prepare for that is to pull down calories a few days prior. So if I want to save 600 calories for a social event, I would just pull down my intake by 200 per day, 3 days before. And ideally I'd want to pull down my carbohydrates and maybe fat intake slightly. If you're only pulling them down by, let's say 200, 300 per day, you're probably not going to notice many knock-on effects to training performance in the gym, because that's what we're always fighting with when you're trying to lose fat and build muscle. We want to obviously ensure that you're in a calorie deficit so you can lose fat, but you don't want to sacrifice too much energy because that will affect your training in the gym. So bank the calories for the events. If you go a little bit over more than you thought, you can obviously pull down calories a little bit the next day as well. So I hope that you enjoy the video, guys, and hopefully that provides you with a lot of value and you're now more confident with setting up your own nutrition approach if you're trying to lean down and build muscle at the same time. If you'd like to find out more about our coaching, hit the coaching inquiry link in the bio below, and I will be in touch on WhatsApp to book in for a consultation call so we can discuss your goals in more detail.